evening, everybody. Welcome to Zoom at 8. My name is Julianne Peterson, and I am your host every Tuesday night. My goodness, we've been doing this for over 5 years. You know, we work with a lot of education programs that have an ecosystem that feeds a deal. So if you have a deal and you need lending, I would love the opportunity. And so we could look at it from a lending standpoint. We would need your T12, your rent roll, the OM offering memorandum, and your underwriting. So you package that up for me. We'll underwrite it in 48 minutes. And let's say you get that approved. You come back to Zoom at 8 with all your friends, your closest relatives here in commercial real estate, and then you can present it to us. You can look for investors here. You can look for vendors. We're here to help, right? That is the whole purpose, is to build your network. So the only way that people are getting deals done are through their network. People have lost a ton of money. I have a lot of money on the line as well. I don't want to see it lost. But I knew the people that I invested in. Some people did not. They didn't know who they were investing in, or they got into deals where maybe somebody didn't tell them the truth. And so there can be a battle going on out that you might hear about, and some investors have pulled back a little bit. And so that's the challenge in today's market. I got to tell you, the interest rates are amazing. They haven't been this low in some time. And by that, I mean the 10-year, the 7-year, and the 5-year treasury. It is amazing. I mean, we're at a low time, 40 or 52-week low. So why can't we get these deals done? Well, these operators still think that they can be asking for 2021 pricing. Not happening. We've got a lot more economic vacancy. A lot of people living and putting their shoes at the front door, but they're not paying. Or we're seeing a lot of concessions. So when you're underwriting deals, start at 65%. Don't underwrite it at 75 to 80. You're going to be putting in pricing that is way too high. Now, not to say that we can't get there, because as we get the lower interest rates, it is becoming more and more possible. I'm going to be closing a deal at the end of September, and we're at like 74%, 74.7, and the max is 75. So that's good. That's promising. So tonight we have Kelli Lovelace. Kelli and I have known each other. Look at, she dons the great Zoom at 8 shirt. We've known each other for probably 5 or 6 years. And Kelli is a big fan of Old Capital. Kelli is a title insurance closing attorney that works with commercial, industrial, retail, multifamily, and development clients to manage both title research, examination, and curative matters. She is a licensed attorney and practices law in the great state of Texas. However, through a national footprint of Fidelity Title, which is the largest underwriting group in the United States, she can also act as a closing officer in almost every state. So Kelli is here to demystify any of the questions or concerns, or like, what the heck is title insurance? Why do we need it? What the heck is going on? What should I be thinking about when I am told I have to have title insurance? So I want to introduce you to my good friend, Kelli Lovelace. Welcome again, Kelli, to Zoom at 8. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. That was kind of a fun little introduction there.
Well,
Actually, it's kind of title insurance is dry, so it's kind of boring, but let's see if we can spice it up a little bit.
So, Kelli, why would you want to be, number one, an attorney in title? What was your interest in doing that? Tell us a little bit about that.
What was I thinking? I got out of law school in 1989 and came to Dallas to work for one of the largest banking law firms in the state of Texas. At that point in time, we had over 400 clients. And some of your audience probably isn't old enough to remember this, but that was a really bad time bad time in Texas economy, especially. Um, and the boys in well, the boys and girls in Washington decided that Texas uh, wasn't playing by the rules. So there were quite a few banks that went under between 1989 and 1992. So we started off with about 400 clients when I went to work for this firm. And when I departed, we had approximately 20 clients left. So the FDIC came in and basically just annihilated the banking world in Texas. Banks were going under. Um, RTC, OCC, FDIC. It was just a field day with just alphabet soup all over the place with governmental bodies regulating banks. Um, my fortune was that I had a lot of clients that were bankers, and I kind of got my feet wet doing doc prep and things like that for commercial transactions. So I knew quite a few lenders, quite a few lending officers that survived that melee back then. And one of them suggested that I get into the title business because I had the background of both what the banks were looking for from a safety and soundness situation, as well as the document prep. So I knew what the documents looked like. I knew what the documents were going to, what documents were going to be important to a lender. So it kind of comes back to the golden rule of the lenders hold the gold, they make the rules.
Yeah.
So kind of having that peek behind the curtain of what was important to the banks, not only from a transactional perspective, but from their side of the equation being the lender and what they had for compliance issues, not only with shareholders, but with auditors and with the federal government, the governing bodies that basically look at the banks and see who is safe and who is not. So that's how I got into this great
Yeah,
business.
so we always have a business, and we also have, the business side of the transaction, and then we have the personal, or, the people that are going to be buying it. So Kelli, you're dealing with both the business side of it, the property side of it, and you get the information on the personal side, but you don't really get so involved until it's, I guess, would be on the escrow side of the business, right? Because you're going to be
Right.
bringing all the money in on the escrow side. So could you
Right.
unpack for us, what does it look like on a daily basis, the life of a title attorney? What do you do? What do what can we expect from a title attorney in a
So,
transaction?
yeah. So I'm going to broaden it to say a title officer. Uh, in Texas, we run both a title and an escrow line at the same time. So if you're talking or if you're setting up a deal in Texas specifically, you're going to be talking to one individual that's going to be both your title officer and your closing officer, your escrow officer. So the title person, we take in your contract. You guys have gone out and done a great job setting up your syndications, finding your properties, underwriting the transaction. Um, and you ink your deal, you send me the contract, and I start my part of it, which is the review of the history of the property. At the same time, we're also responsible for the money piece of it. So I'm trying to get to know the people that are involved in the deal so I get a feel for not only the real estate piece of it, but also who am I talking with? Does this guy sound shady? Does this lady get her stuff to me in time? Am I going to have to keep following up with people? Where is their documentation? Um, but from jump, we look at every deal exactly the same, or at least I do. Every deal starts with the contract. The contract is my Bible for the deal. I look at the contract as my go-to for every single thing that we're going to do, from prorations, from closing date, from who's paying for what, from critical dates. Uh, the contract is what I'm going to look at, and that's what's going to govern the transaction. Uh, so we start with the contract. I receipt a contract in. Typically, most contracts give you 3 business days to get your earnest money in. So, in between and betwixt the contract hitting my desk and those first 3 days, I'm sending you out a critical dates letter I'm running a background search for Patriot Act violations. If you're on a hot list, then I'm going to know about it immediately, and I'm going to put the deal on notice. And then I also do a quick little background check for whether you're in good standing and possibly if you're an individual, uh, do a background check on you at the same time. So it's basically to make sure that we know who we're dealing with before we get too far down the line.
So I know that we need to have a preliminary title report. That is like from the minute it's under an accepted PSA, an LOI PSA, we have to be getting a preliminary title report and survey to you, so you can, or you're going to run that preliminary for us. So can you unpack what does that title report say, and as a buyer, what do we need to be looking for?
So when you submit a deal, see if you can have as much information as possible to deliver to the title company. It's just going to help us. The critical piece that I always ask for up front is survey. Do you have your survey? Even if it's an existing survey, if it's an old survey, I don't care. Most lenders are going to require that you at least recertify to the lender. So we're going to be looking at doing a new survey anyway, or at least an updated survey. So let me at least have that so that I can kind of see what's on the ground, because the survey acts as an overview from somebody who has actually walked the perimeter, walked the property, shot the elevations in some instances, and found different things that might not appear just from a review of the public records. So some of the things that you might find on a survey would be there's a pathway that leads across the property. It's not an easement, but it's a worn path, and the surveyor will point that out. So are there prescriptive rights that somebody might own? Those things you can glean from a survey if they're available. What the title person does is we do kind of the forensics piece of what your property looks like. So I go search the public records and I find all of the data that has been filed in the county clerk's office for your particular property. And I compile that in a promulgated form called the Commitment for Title Insurance. The commitment will tell you who and what and any kind of encumbrances. So the who's the owner, who is the lender, if there's one been announced at this point in time, what the liability is going to be. Purchase price would be the liability on an owner's title policy, and the loan amount would be the liability on a loan policy. Most times the loan policy and the owner's policy run simultaneously on a transaction. And then we will also pull any and all easements that affect the property. We will pull any kind of oil and gas information, and I'm going to make that a proviso. If it's been recorded at the county clerk's office, sometimes the leases between oil and gas companies don't always get recorded. So that's kind of one of those that you run the risk. If you know that there's oil and gas on your property, you may want to hire a landman in addition to a title company person. But we basically compile all the documentation that affects your property. But I'm going to give you a little warning on this one. Most title companies go back to the point in time of the prior transaction, and they give you information from that date forward. So if you bought a property in 2008, the title company would go back to the 2008 and kind of use that as a cheater, a place to start. In reality, the title company is supposed to go back to the sovereignty, to the owner of record from the time that the state or the governing body at the time granted land to an individual or an entity. So that's what a title company is supposed to do. You go back to the time when the government owned the property and first deeded the property or granted the property a land grant to an individual.
So
A lot of times what
step
you'll
in
see,
here for just a second. So are you talking about 1845? You're going to
yes,
go back and go that far? Wow. Okay.
yeah.
But
That's
you're
what in theory
saying that
supposed to,
most people don't do that.
right. Right. Because at some point in time, I mean, it's the concept of blockchain. At some point in time, there's nothing that's going to come in time in 1845 that's going to affect us today.
Mm-hmm.
So what most title companies will do on a minimum basis, they'll go back 40 years. Some of them do, like I said, they'll cheat and go back to the last deal. Um, I'm going to encourage you, though, to actually uh, gig your title company to give you data from the prior owner, not just the guy that you're doing business with. That's critical, but go back to his owner and possibly his owner's owner. So go back 2 or 3 deeds and title just so that you can get some kind of continuity of flow with the real estate. Is it the same from 1950 to 1960 to 1970? Has something happened to this property? And you'll get a pretty good picture of what's going on.
So I want to jump in here for just a minute, everybody. I was one of these people that was like, why do we pay all this money for title? It just seems like a scam. And it wasn't until I had something go wrong on a deal that I bought from a flipper who had bought it from another person who left the country, and they had code violations. Well, when I bought it, I didn't buy it from her. I bought it from a flipper. So they should have gone back 2, like Kelly's saying. They only went back 1, didn't find it. So I bought it, no problem. I refinanced it, no problem. I went to sell it, and they went back 2, 3 people, and they found this code violation. So I'm under contract to sell this during COVID. And nobody can go into your properties here in California. Everybody's got to be masked up, and they're like prisoners to get into your property. I wanted to keep this buyer, so I went back to the title company, and they supported me. They put in a claim. They supported me getting out of it, but they had to go back to the county, go through all of the paperwork. They were going to have to open up the walls to see that a door was replaced properly with windows. It was a flipping nightmare. So I got to tell you, my thoughts now are title is really important. You don't want to go without it. I don't think you can. Can you, Kelly, go without title insurance? Oh, you can if you buy it outright, right?
Yeah, you can.
No.
The lenders are the ones that make the rules. And we go back to where I got started in this business with safety and soundness. So they never want to report to their board of directors that they loan money on a deal where the guy that they loan money to didn't own the property. So they want to have that title policy in place. So if you're paying for the lender to have title insurance, buck up the extra few dollars and pay for yourself to have the same coverage.
Good point. Now, when we're talking about the different like the benefits, right, is you're really a forensic person. That's kind of your personality in the job that you do. You're trying to find, what do you call it, cloud on title, right?
Right. All right.
And so a person like you needs to be able to find solutions. So can you walk us through a situation like I just shared with everybody, some of the things that you've experienced and how you have fixed them, right, for sale?
So let's see. I've had one company that was had bought several tracts of land that were all contiguous, so they all touched, and they had built on 2 parcels. And in effect, when they did that, they eliminated access to their other parcel, their third parcel. So they had no legal access to do anything to their third parcel. And they came to me, they were going to have to do a complete new ownership interest. And it was a very convoluted solution. And let me just say this, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So don't just go with the first answer. See if you can't play off of somebody's experience, somebody's gray hair like me, somebody's ability to underwrite certain risks. So don't just go with the first person's answer, because a lot of times those are not your only choice. So what we did for this one group, they were going to have to pay for a new title policy, pay for new owners, new loan policy, because they were going to be using um, a different legal description. Anyway, what we ended up doing was we drafted, with the surveyor's help, a legal description that provided an ingress egress access across their existing parcels to their back parcels that allowed them to have the same right of way access that their other parcels had. But it was just kind of everybody was in a hurry and everybody was excited to get the first deals done, but they forgot about the next deal down the road and basically landlocked themselves. So we were able to get them an easement and save them a couple $100,000 in title insurance by allowing them to just work it a different way. So that was a win. That was a win for me, I thought. And you know, in the whole scheme of things, I ended up making no money on the deal, but I think I made a friend, in the business. So I think we'll do business in the future. I think we'll do
Well,
business in the
that
future.
that is a wonderful story. Now,
Uh,
how how often do you have title policy issues or title searches that are a problem?
everyone, every single one has some
Every
kind of
single transaction has a problem.
every single one has a glitch, and that's the beauty of it. Every deal starts out the same with a contract, and then every deal changes as soon as you start looking at what people have done with their property. Are there easements? Are there liens that we need to fix? Are there dead people? Are there did somebody let their corporate status lapse? So there's issues that go along with pretty much every transaction. I mean, a lot of people just get lazy with their real estate. They bought
Huh.
it, they own it, and who really knows, what else are we going to do with this property? It's
Huh.
sitting here forever. I've had one lady, this goes to who owns the property. So we had one lady that came in, and mama had died. Mama had listed all of these people in an heirship affidavit. Her kids had listed all these people in an heirship affidavit. And the lady that came in to sign the heirship affidavit, when I was talking with her, she's like, yeah, well, Jimmy's in the penitentiary. I'm like, well, who's Jimmy? She's like, well, he's the youngest kid, and he was always the black sheep of the family. And so I called the lady that was trying to sell the property. I was like, okay, what about Jimmy? She goes, oh, Jimmy had the mama for years, so we never include him in anything. Like, well, we can't do that. Jimmy has just as
Interesting.
much rights as everybody else. So anyway,
Finding
you
it's
get crazy
find
stories.
finding what find solutions. That is amazing. And you being in the business for so long, you have a track record and you've seen things. Just like Old Capital, we've been around for so long, we understand how to get deals done in a quick amount of time with the right lender. So you're great to know. So
So we
what
can also
about,
help with the underwriting part of it.
okay,
If you're
tell us.
looking at, um, you want to go into a transaction and you're looking at a particular piece of property, if you can let me know, I can run a search. This is not for a commitment, but I can run a search separate and apart from everything else and kind of give you the background so that you have some of this stuff up front to look at so that you can see if there's an oil and gas pipeline that runs through your property, if there's if you're landlocked, if there's going to be an easement issue, so that you can do some of this, what's going on with the property, and underwrite the property at the same time as you're underwriting the deal. So if that's helpful to anybody, we can do that too.
That's fantastic. All right, so talk to us about title insurance in Texas versus other states. I understand that there's some differences. So can you walk us through that?
So Texas has established its own set of rules, and that falls under the guide of We live in a federal system. The federal government has certain rules that protect the United States as a whole. Then each state has the purview over their particular boundaries. So Texas came in and said, we're going to set up our own title insurance rules, and we operate under the Texas Land Title Association rules. Kind of mirrors ALTA, if you're familiar with ALTA, or California Land Title, kind of mirrors them, but there are some distinct differences. I'm going to just throw out a couple of provisos for everybody, because I know while I live in Texas, not everybody works in Texas. Always look, when you're looking at transactions in a state, always look to see if there's any kind of reissue credit. So if a transaction on a refinance, if it's within so many years, most states will offer you a reissue credit so that you're not paying full boat on a title policy for a loan transaction. Some states, I believe Florida, will also allow you to have a reissue credit if the transaction if the last deed hasn't been filed for so many years too. So that's one tip there, is to always ask a reissue credit in the state where you're operating. But Texas gives you kind of a bare bones policy. And then it's more like a cafeteria plan. You walk down the lane and you pick out what you want to add on to your title policy. And while Texas is one of the most expensive states for title insurance, when you start adding the endorsements onto it, it gets even more expensive. So I would always advise you to seek the advice of counsel to see if you really need some of these endorsements that people try to sell you. I will also tell you that title insurance is the cheapest insurance you're ever going to buy, and you're only going to do it one time. So if you have a very large deal, it might just be worth it to endorse your policies to the fullest. So
Great suggestion. Are the policies the same and do you run them in residential the same as you do in commercial? Are you running the same searches?
we do. There are not the same endorsements available on residential transactions as there are in commercial transactions.
So on a commercial title policy, what can you expect to pay? Is it a percentage of the sale price? How does that get priced out?
So title insurance is a promulgated rate. So in Texas, the Texas Department of Insurance sets the rates for title insurance, and it's based on a formula. We also have a website that you can, or a link that I can provide to you for if you want to run your own rate calculator. And I'll put that in the chat here in a minute. But you can run just to get an estimate, or you can call me and I can give you an estimate in Texas on what the policy is going to be. But it's promulgated rates, and that goes to another point. With title insurance, we operate on a very homogeneous basis. Nobody can offer any kind of coverage different than anybody else in the state of Texas. So you're basically working on relationships in the title insurance industry. Pick somebody that you know, have a second person in case you run into the I can't get this deal underwritten, but develop relationships with these people so that you know that they understand how you operate as a business person and what you're looking for from the title insurance company. I will tell you that I think the relationship is probably the primary thing, that you don't just treat it as a blind, that because they work for a title company, they're going to have your best interest. Every title company that I have worked with, from my very first title company through my very last one, has had an embezzlement issue. Every single one. And it's kind of the dirty secret of title is that, and this is more on the escrow side of it, but there's a lot of money that flows through a title company. And people get greedy and walk off with your money, and it's very scary. So know who you're dealing with, make sure that you have accountability, make sure that you have receipts of when money was deposited, who is sending money in.
How would you know if you are being embezzled? Your money is what's the forensics for a person like anybody in the room? How would they know that?
It's a Ponzi scheme. So that just rolls from one deal to the next deal to the next deal to the next deal. And Ponzi schemes always blow up. So eventually you will have somebody that comes in and says, I need my earnest money because I'm going to borrow, I'm going to go buy a piece of property and the deal's closing in 2 weeks. And they've run up to the person that was doing the embezzling has run up against the wall and now doesn't have any more
Hmm,
money to play with from other people's deals. So
interesting.
it'll come up in that situation.
So how
Uh,
does somebody choose a title company? I know that on the sale side, typically it comes from the seller, right? They
right,
choose.
right.
So if somebody wants Kelli, how did they get to appoint Kelli?
So again, you're looking at relationships, and everybody in commercial real estate has their favorite title person. And there are a lot of good people in the title industry. I'm just giving you those what if scenarios. So just make sure you know who they are. I always think it's kind of funny that the seller gets to pick the title company because the
Yeah,
buyer is going to end up being the one that lists with the title policy.
yeah.
So if you are dead set that you want to work with a particular title company, you as the buyer can say, I only want to work with Fidelity. And the
Mm,
seller will say, that's great, but I only want to work with Old Republic. So now it becomes a contractual term that you're negotiating. Um, I will tell you, I have never stood in the way of anybody getting their deal done. Your deal is much more important than who you choose for title insurance. And again, because that's a homogeneous product. And if you've worked with me in the past, I'm happy to review stuff for you, look at your closing fees. Did we get the right endorsements? And I just do that just as a courtesy because, again, I think those deals will come back around to me eventually. Um, but you need to, if you're the buyer and the seller is adamant that they want their title company, please call the title company and make sure that you introduce yourself. They should be doing it as well. The title company should be doing it as well. But get to know your title person um, because you're going to have to live with them.
mm.
If God forbid something goes wrong and you do have to make a claim, you're going to be going back to that person. You're going to want them to be on your team to help you. So get to know your title person. In theory, the title person, the escrow officer, the title person is supposed to be a neutral party. I always laugh because, one of these days I'm going to get a badge that says, there's a new sheriff in town because I kind of look at the regulatory things and say, I need certain things from you and I need certain things from you. And everything is confidential. I always ask if we can share things between the buyer and the seller. Um, so try to make sure that you develop the relationship and then and don't be afraid to ask too. Don't be afraid to ask questions of the person that you're dealing with. How much experience have you had? How are we going to get things underwritten? uh, Always ask for copies of things and make sure that you keep a good dialogue of, if you have a conversation, put it down in writing and an email follow up. I mean, these are just standard business
Sure,
practices, but
sure.
make sure that you're following up with your title company.
But I mean, as a title person and an escrow company, I know I've done transactions in quite a few different states, and they're all different. California, we don't use attorneys here. We use a title and an escrow, two different companies. Sometimes they share a business office, but they're always two different companies. In Chicago, purchasing, we had an attorney. We didn't have a title company. We didn't have an escrow company. We just had an attorney, and he managed it all. So, can you tell us the difference on title and escrow? How in the great state of Texas, how is that? What is the differences?
So the title piece acts as the examination and procurement of documents. The escrow piece acts as a third party that holds things of value for the transaction. And most often you're talking about money. However, if you don't feel, I had one person that went out of town. He was going to Beijing, China, and was going to be gone during the middle of our closing. So we met 2 weeks ahead of time. We signed an escrow agreement that said, I will hold your documents in escrow. So I had the closing package. I had his vesting deed where I could have handed it to the buyer, you know, and
Mm.
he's concerned about, well, if you've got the deed, how am I going to get paid? So we signed an escrow agreement that said, I'm holding your documents in escrow. They will only be released under certain circumstances. One of those conditions would be that you provide me again in writing, you have my permission to release escrow, break escrow of the closing document package, not the money piece, but the document package, and put that back into the deal then. So it's it's a person that is holding things in trust for the transaction.
Okay, and so are there, and you do both.
I
You
do both.
are
Right.
you are the attorney and an escrow person.
Right. Right. But I'm a licensed attorney that does other things. Um, my primary business is the title insurance industry, so I like the deal flow. I like seeing other people bring me their deals. I kind of get to satisfy my deal junkie vibe by getting everybody else's deals in here. I learn a lot from
Mm.
other people, how they structure their deals. Um, I sometimes have information on deals that fall out and maybe, find me a buyer for this deal. And that's very rare, but that does happen sometimes. But for me to say I'm a closing attorney, that's just an added bonus of me having gone to law school. In Texas, you don't have to be an attorney to be an escrow officer.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be licensed by the state through the Texas Department of Insurance, but it's just a bonus. And at this level, when you're dealing with millions and millions of dollars, I would ask that question, how long have you been doing this? Are you an attorney? Is there an attorney in your office? Do you have an underwriter available that can answer questions if you're not an attorney? So it just it gives me a broader base of understanding and I think a more diverse way of looking at things of underwriting transactions. So
Well,
I do my own underwriting. My own underwriting is from the insurance perspective, will I insure this? Will I insure
mhm.
this risk?
Okay, interesting. Um, so I think we've covered a lot of information here. Very helpful to understand, what is title, what is escrow, some of the challenges, the purposes behind them. Is there anything else that we need to talk about, like a claim? How does somebody file a claim? How long does that take? Can you sell it if there's a claim against the property? What are some of the things that we want to make sure that everybody understands if that's the case?
So after your deal is closed, everybody gets very excited because their transaction's closed. Make sure that you actually obtain your title insurance policy because how you file a claim is going to be contained in your title insurance policy. There's usually a phone number and an email. And once you get to a point where you're thinking that there's a claim that needs to be filed, you can call me as the closer, and I'm going to refer you immediately to claims underwriting, to our claims and litigation attorney staff. Because when you buy title insurance, not only do you get the liability of your deal, so if you have a complete failure of title, I'm going to pay you what your policy says that you bought the property for. But we also cover court costs and legal expenses incurred if we're representing you through the claim process. So understand that it's kind of you have a legal team that's helping you process through your claim as well. Um,
And
there's
you
also
only you only buy one policy, right? That's what you
only
had
about one
mentioned
policy.
before. So it's not like you're buying a policy. You buy the policy, but you have to renew it every year, like you would in you know, homeowners, right?
Right,
Okay,
right.
a
You
premium.
you buy it one time, and it should last the life of your policy, the life of the time that you own the property. Uh, there are ways that you can lose your coverage, but that would come into play if you are transferring titles around So your title policy only lasts as long as you're the owner of the property. So be careful on uh, changing ownership, like through an LLC change, things like that. So it's not necessarily you're deeding the property, but you're changing the LLC. So, um, but that's a really in-depth conversation that we can have at a different time. But there's also claims that title companies won't pay. So understand that if you've got a title company that is working both as the escrow piece and as the title piece, there are certain claims that go towards title. There's a defect in the title, something that was not discovered in the chain history and the document history. And then there's closing errors. And a lot of times the closing errors will revolve around taxes. So I try to make sure that people at the closing table have an understanding that if there is ever a claim with respect to taxes, you two are going to work it outside of me. If I've just completely messed up and I didn't pull the right tax information forward, then that falls back to me for not doing my job correctly. And then I personally would write a check to cover your tax issue or whatever that defalcation was. But we try to avoid that at all costs by doing a really good job of providing invoices and things like that at closing. So,
okay.
I have those discussions too about, are you sure these are the prorations? Everybody look at their prorations. Let's make sure we've got the dates right, the money right. So let's make sure we've got the prorations.
And you know, sometimes it gets delayed. So there's even further changes to those. So excellent. Well, let's open it up. Oh, first of all, I think let's make sure that Kelli, to contact Kelli. Kelli, I see it in the chat, but for those of us that are watching YouTube channel, Zoom at 8, how can somebody reach you?
My phone is the best way. My phone number's 214-546-3366, or you can reach me at KD Lovelace, Lovelace, at fntplano.com. FNT, Fidelity National Title. Plano is the city in which I operate, Plano, Texas. fntplano.com.
Good. Excellent. Well, let's open it up. I'm not sure you've done a lot of explaining here, and I know that there's still people that are like, yeah, title, okay, yeah. Who cares? Just tell me how much I owe and boom. Is there anybody in the room that has a question that we can answer for you on title? All right, let's not all. Chris DeSalle. I don't want you all talking at the same time. So Chris, go ahead.
Kelli, great presentation, really awesome explanations and everything like that. Do you foresee any of this stuff going to the blockchain so we don't have to do this every time after time after time?
Great
It's already
question.
in the works. Yeah, I am operating a buggy whip station right now. So it's in the works. Blockchain will come in, and I don't necessarily know that it'll take out the escrow piece, because I think people need to have that verification of trust. But I think the title will be a blockchain issue. And I think that'll be in the very near future. Yeah.
I'm just thinking time, it would speed things up tremendously, right? So not to put you out of a gig, but I'm just thinking down the road.
That's a great question. And it seems to me like, some of my experience is that it's really not title's issue when it comes down to the delay in closing. It's more of the buyers and the sellers, agreeing on things, getting their paperwork in order, getting their leases audited, all of that stuff. And it seems to me like we're always getting knock from the escrow company saying, are we closing? Are we closing? How about now? How about now? So I think they do a great job, escrow companies. Everybody works hard. They're all committed. They're good to work with. So Lisa Mays, what do you got?
Hey, so I know every state is going to be different, but For scenarios where time is of the essence, say maybe for an auction, is there a quick and dirty that you can run to get us comfortable with, say, any liens on the property before we move forward with the auction?
I can. It usually is a 24-hour search. So if I have 24 hours, then yeah, I can do those. I do charge a fee for those, and we can talk about that because the fees are different with respect to residential versus a commercial transaction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, there's a question. Julia has a question, maybe not directly related to title, but can you share about the personal property tax sales that happen in the county, and when you get a title agent involved, and what to watch for in the transaction with the county?
Okay, so good question, and I get this a lot. The title company is not responsible for personal property. It is a courtesy that's offered from the escrow side of the transaction. So if you want us to collect your personal property taxes and make it part of the transaction, then that's basically me collecting an invoice, just like a surveyor invoice or an insurance invoice. You give it to me, I'm going to put it on the settlement statement exactly as I find it. Most counties require the seller to notify them that they have had an exchange and that there's a new buyer. So make sure that when you're looking at that kind of transaction where you've got personal property affiliated with the transaction, that you have buyer's contact information, a way to get in touch with them after closing, and understand that it is the seller's responsibility to go to the county and say, we are no longer in possession of this property. It's our bill of sale. We no longer have this property. The county should at that point in time move the liability to the buyer. The proration should work the same, truly, but it's going to be the seller's obligation to go to the county to have that taken out of his name.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Super helpful. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, sometimes there's, delinquent personal property tax, or it was held in an IRA for so long, and our counties just had them all in Missouri, and that's why it's not on my radar. So super helpful. Thank you for that.
All right, Bob, was there a question? I wasn't sure if you were kind of wanting to raise your hand.
Yeah, there was kind of, and a comment too, but just on the side, we have relationships with title companies in different counties, kind of in different parts of the country. And I don't know if this is something that you do, Kelly, but they provide us actually with information on tax sales and FSBOs and just different types of properties that are coming up that could be marketed as, flips or rentals or anything like that. So wasn't sure if you guys do.
I have a marketing guy that's at our corporate level that I can provide contact information. So if you can just put your name and stuff in the chat, then I'll be happy to get that to you.
Yeah, those reps, the title reps, are extremely helpful for doing some some reconnaissance on what's happening. So great to connect with Kelly and her staff. All right, anybody else? Everybody has the answers, right? Okay, so remember, Kelly, Fidelity National Title, 214-546-3366, or KD Lovelace at fntplano.com. Kelly, thank you. I'm so glad you came back, shared a lot of information with us, and we always get to see you when you show up here at Zoom at 8.